Here is my presentation of our current and ongoing game of Villains and Vigilantes by Jeff D. and Jack Herman. As you can see, this is the version that was published in 1982. Often, I guess the official name of it would be revised. The first version was in 1978. I never saw that one. I saw this one when a kid on a school trip, unlimbered it in the bus and started reading it. And I was kind of like, oh, a superhero role playing game. And I had seen one or two of them sort of on the shelves before, but this was sort of the first one that came actually in reach. So, anyways, it's a remarkable thing. And I'm not sure I really even need to, opine about it. It's a historical event in role playing. Not the very first superhero role playing game, but certainly the hardest hitting. And let's see, its first publication is in 78, and then Champions comes out in 81, and then this one comes out in 82 for perspective. So what I wanted to do, of course, was ultimately to play it one of these days, and the time has finally come. Now, if my observations or discussions are accurate, most people's experience with the game is as high school students playing among one another. Certainly a lot of the people I know who played in the 80s, a little younger than me, were in that category, as they say now. So what's interesting about this, too, is that Dee and Herman themselves were high school students when they made the game. The original version, I think Jeff was 17, and which puts him, just a little bit older than me by like that much. So it should be thought of very much in, teens talking to teens and playing among themselves. That doesn't mean no one else could play it or should or could have a good time with it, but it's an interesting perspective to have. I don't know how much I want to go on and on about this. It's also very much indicator. It indicates very much the kind of comics that the authors liked, particularly their nature in that decade. And some of its features that I've talked about before is that it's certainly a very law-abiding role-playing game. You fight criminals, and you deliver criminals to the authorities in a proper fashion. You are a good guy. There's a part in the rules which is like, if someone wanted to play an evil character, you shouldn't play with that person. The appendix in this version is actually the New York Civil Code, so that you would know exactly what was and wasn't against the law. Because that's actually very important in the game. We are law-abiding. We uphold it. And so there's, most of the pictures are of, villains who are, crooks, robbers, and so on. This is indicated to some extent by kind of a fascination with security clearance, exactly what levels of government, and secrets do you have access to as you progress, which in many ways is, how kind of institutional your character is becoming. The chance to gain and lose charisma, basically on how good or badly you act. And again, the real source of, experience points is delivering apprehended criminals to the proper authorities. Case closed. So those are some of the interesting, features of what kind of game, what kind of superheroes we're talking about. Well, what am I doing now? All right, well, speaking of teens, I am playing with a group of, at last count, 5 young men in their early teens, and the father of two of them. So those are our characters, and of course we have the father, and we have yours truly in his aged state. Um, and I kind of wish that I would bug off and put up the camera and just find out how the guys would play. The young guys would play on their own. But as it is, I'm having a fun time learning the game the way you really need to learn a game, which is to get in there and see what happens when multiple people are making decisions among the options and the outcomes. And here are some things I can tell you. First of all, we haven't played that much. We've played several sessions, and it was basically one encounter, one big sort of introductory slugfest. It's of course set right here. Oh, did I say this? This is the kind of thing I assume everyone knows, that in this game, the idea is that you play your own self, and you are now superpowered. You roll on some tables and stuff and find out like how superpowered. And then you basically play this fictional version of yourself in a naturalistic version of your lives, and that would be everybody at the table. So it kind of is interesting how this precedes the late 80s disavowal of self and character that became almost fanatical. It was around that time, 10 years or so after the initial publication of this game, where you couldn't even have a game at Gen Con, the biggest convention for gaming, if it ever blurred to any extent the line between player and character, and how well that was actually observed as a as a limitation, I don't know, but I do know of several games that were either chilled out of participating by people self-censoring and publishers saying, well, we're not going to showcase that game. And I don't really know if there was ever an official rejection. Oh, look, we found this game here at your table, at your booth, and you can't have it here. I don't know if that ever happened. So still, though, it was widely stated among role players that to confuse yourself between who's the character and who's the player. I mean, the whole satanic panic and the concept of getting lost in your character and, oh no, Blackleaf's dead, shut up, Marcy, you're dead. That really got internalized by the role players. I mean, role players lived in terror of such a thing happening. Arguably, propaganda regarding that was far more effective on role-playing culture than it was on anyone else. Well, anyway, so this game, chest out, says, play yourself, because that's your character. And there are some other interesting things in there. For example, as you level up, one of your options is to decrease your character's weight, and then you could increase your strength and endurance. And there's actually an equation. You decrease your weight by this much, and your strength and endurance can go up by this much. And strangely, there's also the opposite, although tactically I'm not sure what that means, which is to gain weight and decrease your strength and endurance. I think it may make your basic hits go up or something. But the point is that one kind of casts an eye and say, is this like trying to get your actual friends? Is this more blurring? It's trying to get your actual friends to get in shape? Well, it's pretty blurry. I mean, there's no guidelines for how to play yourself or how to keep yourself and your character apart so you don't have a schizophrenic break or something. No, that's not in there. Handle it, I guess, if indeed there is anything to handle, because as far as I can tell, playing the game, there isn't. It's no more difficult to play yourself as a fictional character than it is to play any fictional character. So here we go. What are we talking about? I strongly urge you to find in some fashion a copy of this and enjoy it. and reading and working through making up characters at the very least, playing, of course, um, because it is a magnificent example of roll, decide, roll as a sequence of coming up with a character and then locking it in with some final decisions that are truly inspired, really. I mean, it really works to make up Super You. And it does so without any formalization of the you part. All of that, your lifestyle, your money, your everything, it's just not in the game as procedure because it is taken as a given that that is exactly what it is. Where does your character live? Where do you live? What does your character do every day? What do you do? So the game master might say, okay, it's Tuesday morning. Where are you Tuesday mornings? Oh, well, I'm, on my way to school at such and such time. All right, on your way to school. You just do that. It doesn't even tell you to do that. It just says you're where you are, you're doing what you do. Now let's talk about superpowers. And so you have, of course, this may be a little infamous. You set your character's starting attributes as part of character creation at the group's or GM's assessment. I guess you assign it yourself, and then the GM goes, are you really sure you have intelligence 18? 3 to 18, of course, because D&D. And you actually do that for your own strength, agility, intelligence, charisma, etc. I was a little I didn't want to get into wrangles about any of this. So what I did, looking at the perky faces at the table, I said, okay, well, you guys are all, young teens. And so I gave them kind of crap, if not terrible scores, in strength and a couple other things. I gave them decent agility, like 12 or something. But everything else is pretty basic. And then I said intelligence, basic to low, I mean, and then because they're not grown up, and intelligence, I said, okay, you're all a bunch of, bright nerds, give you a 16. We'll just go from there, everybody. And then I said, and you're all kids. Nobody takes you seriously. So you all have charisma of 8. So I just landed them with the scores. For Jonas, I said, set your own scores. I didn't even look. So then what you do is roll d6 and add 2. And that's how many of the basic rolls on the powers page that you get. And you might say, wow, what if I only get 3 and that dude gets 8? That's terrible. There's actually a really good rule for that. The less you have, the more flexibly you interpret the textual power. So if you have, you roll 6 and you get 8, then that means they do exactly what they do in a very limited fashion. I mean, toward maybe even a specific application of what's written there. Whereas if you have 3, then, each one, you got chemical power. Well, it can do anything that chemical setup could do. So first and foremost, doesn't really matter how many you get because of that. So then there are several categories. They're a little interesting. There's powers, there's devices, there's magic psionic items, then there's magic psionics, and then there's skills. Skills include a lot of attribute increase. So that's one way, you would get, if you want to kind of beef up your character's basic numbers, you would roll on there. There are other things in there too, like pets and stuff, but that's the basic idea of the skills. And actually, after making up a lot of characters now, I kind of grade toward that skills. I'm like, I want some higher numbers. I'll take 1 power, fine, but I need some weight here.